Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. Today, I have a very special guest. This is someone that I have been truly looking forward to interviewing for a while now. Tori Bell, the founder of Inclusion Unpacked, is on. Tori, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I feel so honored.
Yes, no, I've been really looking forward to it. I've been following you on social. I've been following your brand, admiring how you're building and getting your name out there. And so I want to dive into all of that good stuff. Whenever I have a founder on for the first time, I always love to hear about their backstory. And I would love to hear about yours, a bit about your career, how you started the brand. I would love to hear the scope of how we are here.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, I'm Tori. I'm the founder of Inclusion Unpacked. I started Inclusion Unpacked really to provide tangible resources and tips to leaders that needed diversity support on demand. And this idea came from I was leading internal culture and community at Facebook. And while at Facebook, I also founded the employee resource group, Black Women at Facebook, and scaled it to over 3,000 members globally.
Wow.
And what I know, it's like
That's
every time I say that,
incredible.
it's like it's so badass.
No, that really is.
Yeah. But when I was leading that community, what I found was that Facebook and big tech at the time, I can't speak to it now because I'm so many years removed from working there, but at
Right.
the time had a ton of issues around diversity and inclusion. Um, you know, uh, Women of color at the company were typically underleveled, underpaid, had more HR violations than any other group within the organization. And it just made me super curious about like, wow, this company is so progressive, but this community internally is suffering so much. And that wasn't unique to Facebook, that was across like big tech as well. And then at the same time, in 2020 and 2021 was the big diversity reckoning. The murder of George Floyd, I think, woke a lot of companies up to, oh my gosh, like we need to be prioritizing diversity and inclusion. We don't know where to start. Like, how do we begin doing this? And so
Right.
I started Inclusion Unpacked as a newsletter. I was doing some like one-off consulting work with Sophia Amoruso from Girl Boss.
Yes.
And
I remember that
yeah,
series. Yes.
and I started Inclusion Unpacked as a newsletter to help her, the founders within like her community get tangible diversity resources. And I think it was just like the right time to start that. I got a little bit of press and a little following around this concept of providing like how to diversity guides on demand. And then I was like, I got the idea actually from somebody within the newsletter community saying like, you should make this like an actual business. Like I would pay to be matched with an expert and like get resources on demand. And I loved that concept. And so I ended up leaving Facebook. I got a full ride to business school at Columbia. Um,
Incredible.
yeah, also badass. I'm like another fit.
Yeah.
I love this.
We
When
have to pause in those moments and
I
say, oh my
know.
gosh, that's amazing. No, okay. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I think sometimes also as women of color, you don't really sit in like the amazingness that you are. So I appreciate you like forcing me to
Yeah.
pause. But yeah, I went to Columbia to refine this business model of like, okay, what could a diversity resource on demand look like? I had a bunch of ideas for what Inclusion Unpacked could be. I wanted to turn the newsletter community into an actual business. So that's why I went to business school. And during that time, I won a bunch of pitch competitions and awards for this idea of essentially like a membership community that companies pay into. They get matched with a diversity expert. They can also access downloadable guides and resources on demand, like making diversity really fun and accessible for new founders and leaders starting out in their journey. Like I really wanted to make it fun and simple. And also I feel like diversity tends to be really heavy. Like when you think about diversity, it's like, sometimes it scares people away who are well-intentioned. And I just love this idea of making it like cutesy. which is like, I apologize for how that might come across, but I wanted it to be like this inviting thing that felt exciting to entice people to be a part of early on. And
Right.
so initially my goal was to focus on early stage founders, capture them early, grow with them throughout the life cycle of their businesses, and really help them embed diversity best practices early on. And so that was like the whole premise for Inclusion Unpacked. I will say, building a tech startup, sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? Because it's so hard. And also, um, right now with the diversity landscape,
Yes.
it like sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? And I'm so passionate about the space. I spent my entire career here. I really believe that this space is ripe for innovation. It just like takes longer than I thought it would take to start a business. And I think sometimes I have to remind myself that like, the goal is still there. We're making progress, and it might not be as visible as maybe like other like CPG brands or like other, founder friends who have like
Right.
physical products. But the goal is still there. And so yeah, I won a bunch of pitch competitions and awards. We recently got into Techstars, which for those of you, or if you know of the startup world, Techstars is the number one incubator accelerator program in the world. So
Wow.
which is
That's really
amazing.
amazing too.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. I feel like I'm skipping over a lot that I can like go back to.
No, this is great.
But yeah, it was in Techstars this summer, and they select Techstars has like a bunch of themed programs. So the program that I was in was Techstars Workforce Development. So all of
Okay.
the other founders in my cohort were around creating startups that tackled workforce issues. There are 12 of us. Techstars invests money into your company for a percentage of your company. And then throughout the summer, you're matched with mentors, you have programming to help you grow and scale your business. And then at the end of Techstars, you go through this thing called demo day, where you get up on stage and you pitch your company for like 5 minutes. And it's kind of like um, TED Talk style meets Shark Tank.
Okay. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah. And so you're preparing for weeks for this. It's incredibly stressful. Then at the end of it, you have this like video to share to potential investors and customers about your
Got
company.
it. Okay.
Um, so we just wrapped that a couple of weeks ago. I'm in active investor conversations right now, and I'm excited for some of them to land. And then we just landed our first major customer, which I can't share, but it's a small tech company that you've heard of, who will be leveraging Inclusion Unpacked as their primary diversity resource. So I'm excited about
Incredible.
that.
So then
Yeah,
you just landed your first major client in the space.
yeah, it's really exciting, and I
That's
think
amazing too.
I know. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
I think it's nice to like. I'm trying to be in a space of like pausing and celebrating the tiny milestones along the way.
It's
Uh,
hard as a founder in general. And so I always like to pause and take that moment because it's really easy to just be on the next thing. But the fact that you had this idea in 2020, started taking action on it, and already, I mean, I'm sure it feels like a million years has gone by because when you're working on something it's so passionate, but really it has been a relative short time and a lot has changed within the workspace, right? And just politically. And the fact that you've been able to shift and adapt and land your first client and have conversations with investors, it's incredible.
yeah, no, that's so. Thank you for that. And I agree with you. As founders, and just the nature of the startup world is very like chasing the next thing,
Right.
and so never sit with like the most recent win, which is amazing. Like getting into Colombia on a full ride, like that's amazing in itself, just the
Like
or
next level. That's something I can't even like wrap my head around for even like myself to even do that. Like I struggled really hard to get into like a community school. So like someone that's even on my podcast getting a full ride to Colombia. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so honored you're here. that
You're so
that's
But no,
really amazing.
I was like you, like for undergrad, I went to community college my first 2 years, and then I went to 4 year, like an all women's college. So like super non-traditional.
Yeah,
The fact that like yeah, ended up at Columbia, I would have never thought that that was possible for me either. But it has opened up so many doors with creating Inclusion Unpacked. Columbia invested in the company after I graduated, which is another
that's
amazing.
another amazing thing. So
Wait,
we're just
what?
this podcast is just
I
going to be
know.
really a
My
celebration
resume. I know.
of milestones and all the things you're doing. I'm literally filling up a whole page of notes, but I love hearing this because again, what you're doing is so important and not an easy lift by any means, but you're finding different paths to make it happen. So, something that you mentioned, and I maybe it shifted when you were saying how you originally were going after early stage founders. Has that shifted? Or what have you also like taken from like the initial concept to where you are now to like the vision that you're building? Maybe anything that you've had to edit, refine, shift, change to kind of
Yeah.
make it work in 2024 and beyond?
That's a great question. So, what you will learn as a startup founder is that going after a small niche audience for investors, it's not super sexy. And so they want to see something that has the potential for large scale and large impact. And so, yes, supporting startup founders and new managers will always be there for Inclusion Unpacked. But where we have grown and expanded, like thinking about how we can support enterprise
Got
organizations.
it.
And a lot of times, like right now, there's a huge diversity reckoning. There's a lot of diversity departments that are being reduced or downsized. And so within these enterprise organizations, they still need diversity and inclusion support, but just like on a fractional basis. And so we've expanded to supporting like new manager communities or smaller teams within enterprise organizations so that we can expand our scale. So to my point about our first enterprise customer being a tech company, they have downsized their diversity team, but they still need fractional support. And so that's where Inclusion Unpacked comes in, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. So you're still doing that more on demand resource, but it sounds like you've added on that fractional DEI role so that companies, if they, make their section smaller for DEI, you're still able to plug in and support that.
Yeah, I mean, our big bet is that the diversity industry is going to continue to change. We might not ever see departments like we've seen in the past, but companies still want that fractional on-demand support where they can ask questions and get
Got it.
feedback. And so our tech model is similar to that of like, if you're familiar with telehealth, where you get
Yes.
matched with a doctor for your specific needs. The vision for Inclusion Unpacked is that you get matched with a diversity expert for your specific needs. So if you're a founder, typically your specific needs are like, how do I get started? Where do I begin? Like very basic questions. But if you're a manager, your questions might be, how do I build an inclusive team? How do I focus on diversity hiring? And so anyway, focusing on like the telehealth on-demand access. Why can't I think of the word that I was about to say?
Access. Yeah.
Is where we're headed. And yeah, our big bet is that the diversity industry is going to change and we might not ever see departments like we've seen, but
Right.
we're very excited about fractional. And so that's
I
where we come
think
in.
that's a really interesting space in general, like speaking to fractional CMOs and fractional CFOs and what you're doing here. I'm like, that totally makes sense. And also is such an important piece of the pie of building a business and a business of the future. So I'm so glad to hear that you're still doing it and finding ways to make it happen. And I'm really excited to hear more of the journey as you develop this and have now your first major client of enterprise org and how that path is going. And already, again, what you've done in 4 short years is really incredible.
Really, thank you. I
You're
appreciate
welcome. You're welcome. I really mean it. As far as the vision that you have, maybe just for yourself as a founder or yourself as just a human, like what would you love for this all to kind of come together as, or maybe just
Yeah,
in general of what you want to be building?
for Inclusion Unpacked, I want like every new company starting out to be like, oh, we need to be an Inclusion Unpacked member company. Like I want us to be a household name. I want us to make diversity and inclusion really fun and accessible and less daunting. Like I feel like even though there's so much chaos right now in the industry, it's ripe for disruption. I
Right.
think we're the perfect company to do that. And I want us to get there. So that's my vision for the company. Now, for myself as a founder, you learn so much about yourself. That's one of my favorite things about entrepreneurship is that you learn so much about yourself along the way.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've learned early on is that like you don't have to struggle to build your business, to build a business that you're passionate about. I think a lot of times you read headlines about like, oh, this person drained their 401k, they slept in their car, it just like went all in. And I admire those people. I thought I needed to be that. So after I graduated business school, um, I went through a rough, I don't know, time trying to figure out like how we were going to finance the business. And I found an investor who I thought was coming in on our round, but ended up not deploying funds. And so it was like really scary financially to
Wow.
how we were going to, how I was going to survive and how the company was going to survive. And yeah, I just like, I wish during that time I was, focusing on applying for grants and programs. There's so many out there. I've since like obviously getting into Techstars, I won a bunch of grants and pitch competitions, but like for a moment there, like I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent or like pay groceries. And it just was like
Well,
really
that's
scary.
real.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times founders don't talk about that. Um, and I don't know, there's just so many paths to building a business that you're passionate about. Like I know founders that have contract jobs and are building their startups or they're working part-time somewhere, like you don't have
Right.
to, prescribe to like the headlines that you're seeing. But like prioritize yourself first. That's like for me, the biggest thing that I'm focusing on this year, like I just want stability financially. And then I want Inclusion Unpacked to be successful, but like it can't be successful if I'm not in a good place. And
Right.
last year it was really tough for me just figuring out how I was gonna, make it through. So but yeah, very rough time. So I would say like, yeah, prioritizing myself is like the biggest vision I have for this year and beyond. And of course, I want Inclusion Impact to be a great business, but I'm I'm more important than this business.
Yes, and it can't be at the detriment of yourself. And I could speak to that in my own experience. I too was in a very like intense entrepreneurial experience. It was a part of a bigger fund in a concentrated area in the country, and there was like lots of entrepreneurs and funding, and I was working on an investment project, and I gave it my all, like literally every ounce of my being. I remember one day literally not being able to go to the bathroom and just laying in bed, and like the idea of getting up to go to the bathroom was like so hard and daunting because like all the energy was like drained from my body. And I remember in that moment being like, okay, this
This is
can't, like,
not
nothing is worth this. Like I
yeah.
have to, and it's taken me a really long time. I think this is the first year ever that I have figured out somewhat of like taking care of myself and building my business and doing the things. So I really appreciate you saying that because I used to have that pressure on myself a lot. And this is the first year I've started making that shift. and oh my gosh, it's so much better. But it's giving yourself that permission and finding that way. So I'm really glad that you just said that because I'm sure and at least one founder is going to be listening to this and being like, "Okay, thank you, Tori. I
I
don't have to
hope
be killing
so.
myself to make this happen."
I hope so. I mean, it was so bad last year. I was like reaching out to mentors and like, asking for help, but I wish I would have asked for help sooner. And, it's just,
Right.
don't know what you don't know, but I will never put myself in that position again. And like, I finally have health insurance and like, just
Which
like
is major.
it's huge. Yeah. Like I love that entrepreneurship gets glamorized because I love entrepreneurship, but
Same,
also
yeah.
like the struggle of it is like that's not we don't need to be doing that. There are other paths to build, your vision. And so I'm glad that
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any other piece of advice you would share with a early stage founder who maybe is in that chapter where you were even last year or trying to figure it out or maybe a few chapters ago that you would just want to emphasize to someone?
apply for grants all the time. There are so many
Okay.
there. Maybe that's unconventional. I don't know if
No,
anybody
I
else.
think that's great.
There are so many out there, especially if you're a female founder or a founder of color. There's so much free money out there that you don't even realize exists. But I've leveraged platforms like Female Founder World or Mogul Millennial that have been really helpful. I won a TikTok grant last year. I won a grant through Black Girl Ventures. That's how
Amazing.
I found Techstars through Mogul Millennial as well. There's just so much free money out there. So I would encourage you to, look for grants, look for ways that you can support your business that doesn't require you to deplete your savings. The other is like
Right.
investing in community too. I'm really involved in like the entrepreneurista community. I know there are communities like Female Founder World that are great too, but building alongside other founders, sharing your struggles, sharing resources is key. Like no one builds alone. And I don't know, like if you're like me, Kelly, but like I was the type of person that was like, yeah, I can just do this by myself. Like, and I'll just show people the finished product once it's
Same.
done. That is not how building a business works.
It's
And
so true. I used to think that too. Like, if I didn't personally do every single thing, it wasn't like pure enough, or like, I don't know. I had this in my head that like I had to do everything, and I would really struggle doing it all by myself.
I mean, I think that it bleeds into like the financial struggle too of like I have to carry
Right.
the whole business on my back. But like, yes, like I have an amazing network of friends out there. They're also building businesses and we share resources and tips and like it's not competitive. So those communities have been invaluable to me, but I just in 2024, I don't understand how anybody could build a business by themselves. It's so hard. Um,
Absolutely. No, that you honestly, this whole episode is going to be advice, tips, encouragement, different ways of looking at your path as an entrepreneur and founder. And I cannot thank you enough. So, last question. I know I have to let you go, but I could talk to you forever. How can someone, maybe an early stage founder or someone who's in leadership, work with Inclusion Unpacked?
Yeah, we sell directly into companies, so we're not like, D2C. If they want to work with us, they can go on inclusionunpacked.com, sign up for our newsletter, or email us directly at hello@inclusionunpacked.com for more information. So those are the best two ways of getting in touch with us. We're rolling out a new platform soon, which should launch very soon. But in the meantime, you have our email and our website. And Instagram as well at Inclusion Unpacked. Yeah.
Incredible. I'll put it all in the show notes.
Thank you.
Tori, seriously, congratulations. The
Thank you
twists
so
and
much.
turns and the highs and the
I
lows that you shared today. I
know.
truly appreciate it. This is like why I wanted to start this podcast to capture this. And I really genuinely appreciate your time and energy and everything that you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you. This is
Of
awesome.
course, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Go check out Inclusion Unpacked, and I'll see you on the next episode.